Hey, y'all. Craig. I don't think the conspiracy theories go far enough. Truth truly has become stranger than fiction. Here we are. We've seen the Superior Court basically pass on looking at any of this election fraud stuff. They're not even commenting; they're just passing on it. And at the same time, you're seeing the states, especially the states that are really in question, coming forward and saying, "Oh yeah, these several hundreds of thousands of votes are really ineligible, and we're going to change the laws kind of back to the way they were." And on the flip side, like in Arizona, the what is it, like the Board of Supervisors over the election, fought the Senate over a real audit for ever since. And they finally said, "Well, yeah, you're right. We should do the audit, and you're in charge." And then they brought in basically, the guys that, like sold them the machines, basically to go ahead and check them out. And then in the process, the Senate, is like this. We understand what's going on here. We want to do a true audit. We want to look at all the ballots, and we want to look at the machines, and you need to send them over to us. And then in the process, they find that the ballots have been stored in basically an open warehouse, and they found a bunch of shredded ballots in a dumpster. So, it's the stuff you expect and the stuff you don't expect, but they just keep doubling down on saying nothing happened and then just taking the most extreme measures to make sure that we all realize that something must have happened, because look at what you guys are doing. And I think the left in general at this point, they've, everything that, in the campaign, everything we said that we suspected might happen seems to be happening at a rapid pace, right? I mean, they haven't attempted to load up the Supreme Court yet. But I've already heard talk of bringing Puerto Rico in as a state. And I think maybe that's why the Supreme Court's been denying these cases and like, "Oh, no, look, we'll play along. Don't mess with us. We're fine over here," which, is stunning when you consider that, there's three separate legs, right? The executive, the legislature, and the courts and the judicial. But the courts are acting like they're subservient to the legislature, and the executive, Joe, I don't know what planet the poor guy's on, but at this point he's not on this one. You're watching the most recent videos. I kind of feel for the guy. He just looks like, they're asking him questions, and he's just, you hear the people behind, "Oh, the president's done. The press needs to go," and the president's. And he, maybe he'd like to answer the questions, but I don't think he's really capable, or that he knows, the depth of the answer. I just don't get that feeling. And, we're finding out more and more. Well, Kamala's been talking to heads of state in other countries, so, then you're starting to hear, oh yeah, they're starting to think, well, maybe we need to take the nuclear codes away from Joe. And maybe, the ability to launch these missile strikes, and maybe we need to talk about how we phase Joe out. You're hearing these little things here and there already. Meanwhile, Joe's just signing executive orders like crazy, trying to do away with every good thing Trump did, which most specifically right now, of course, is the border. And, Biden and crew are like, "Oh, there's no crisis at the border." God, how familiar is this? It's just like Obama. No crisis at the border. And people are like, it's like a wall of people at the wall. And no, they won't finish the wall. And then you see, like, in Texas and Arizona, they're taking extreme measures. Now they have to. I mean, these people are intruding on their property. and they're not getting much help out of the folks in Washington D.C. You know, the Border Patrol's doing what they can, but you know, there's only so many of them, and of course they're spread out all over the place, and then the policies of defund the police or whatever they want to call it. I mean, you know, it's affected all of them. It's been hard to recruit cops. It's been hard to get people in those positions. So it always is, but now it's especially so. And with Biden in office and that whole crew, I mean, they're dismissive of law enforcement. You can see by the way they act that they feel like laws don't really apply to them anyway, right? Well, and that's more of that, right? We're seeing. Well, for instance, what's the most important thing? I think is keep the peace. I mean, obviously enforce the laws, but keep the peace, and not only domestically. And of course, we've been seeing riots steadily. Except, of course, the one place we don't see riots is in Washington, D.C., where they've erected this insanely expensive fence all around the Capitol, the People's House, right? And, it looks like a third world country. It's absurd, But in the meanwhile, no, we can't have the borders, fenced up because that's wrong. Crazy. But, in other countries as well, we're seeing all kinds of crazy stuff starting to pop up and happen. And I think a lot of it has to do with us going back into the America Last stance. All of a sudden, the other countries are emboldened as well, known as being the cop anymore. Because, face it, Trump was being the kind of the good cop that was keeping people in line to a certain extent, right? And with Biden, people see what we see. They're like, well, nothing to worry about there. My gosh, you're starting to see China getting pretty aggressive with Hong Kong and straightening them out, and Taiwan, of course. Taiwan was starting to really build some strength with our relationship and in that whole region. And Biden's not really interested, it doesn't seem, in perpetuating that. And so China's emboldened and causing trouble. So I don't know. I'm sure I'll think of other ones, but it's just one thing after another. The things we said, boy, they'll let this happen, and of course, the whole thing about the transgenderism and the cancel culture and the Mr. Potato Head and the Land O'Lakes Indian woman, and just all this stuff is like. Well, first off, is it just me, or do you find this extremely racist? They're trying to look at everything in this sort of filter of being a racist. Like, you have to look at these things. Well, what could that possibly mean? And say it doesn't mean anything. Okay, lighten up. And it's all of a sudden how to be less white and all. It's like, what? That's racist as hell. What a bunch of bigots. And they're preaching to us? Like, give me a break, y'all. They're just causing so much damage with all this stuff. And, so we've got, where we had peace in the Middle East, now we've got, missiles being lobbed back and forth, and things are really heating up in Iran. And, Israel's very upset, and rightfully so, because, it's only Iran is basically threatening to wipe them off of the globe, but nothing to worry about, right? And of course, death to America and all that stuff. And of course, we're finding out, like, Iranians and a bunch of Syrians, a bunch of, the other kind of foreign folks are coming across the border, just the same way as everyone else. Because I guess what they're doing is they push all these kids up to the border. And, it's not like they separated from their parents. They're taken from their parents. They're being used. So these kids are being put up in the border. It ties up our border patrol because now they have to deal with these kids, and they've got to deal with COVID protocols because, of course, no one's been vaccinated that's been coming up, and a lot of these folks have been in very close quarters with very sick people, so they're very sick. And you hear reports all the time out of California and Arizona and Texas and all along the border that most of the people they're dealing with who are sick, COVID sick, are illegal folks that have come across the border. So we've got these folks coming across the border in waves, using kids to basically distract our border patrol and tie them up while they just use whatever is available, a hole in the wall, unfinished portions of the wall, and they just jam people and drugs right through there. So we've gone back to the old business model, and that means the MS-13 folks are coming right back up, and it's lunacy. And then you hear of like, okay, well, we finally come around to these our COVID emergency extreme financial measures, whatever this bill is that they're going to call it. And of course, we all know that we're getting just a little tiny bit out of this huge bill that they're going to pass, or I guess they've basically passed, and it's going back to the House. But the majority of this money is going to anything but the Americans who need it and who will ultimately be paying for it. Our personal tab at this point, I think, is up to something like $80,000, over $80,000 for each person, just when you're born. Bing, bills due. With all this crazy spending, with letting more and more people across the border who could be sick, but closing down on the people who live inside of the border because they could potentially become sick from a virus that we've largely gotten over in this country. I mean, face it, it's been here for a year. Remember, it was a rapidly spreading virus. What are the chances at this point that it's pretty much spread? And why is it that influenza and the flu and all that numbers are like, the lowest ever? Don't tell me it's the masks. The masks are a bunch of nonsense. We all know it at this point. I mean, it's a clown show. This whole thing is frustrating. I probably look a little disheveled, but my son and I went up to North Carolina yesterday. Took a 12-hour trip. Dropped off some engine blocks to get machined, and picked up a kind of a hulk of a carcass of a car. And we forgot totally, we didn't grab masks or any of that stuff. And so I was like, oh man, I don't even know where we're going to stop. But you know what? Everywhere I stopped, I saw like 2 masks, on some older folks, and that's about it. People are just over all this. They're just like, look, we've got to get busy. We got to get back to work, whatever. Reality is what reality is. People have seen it. Plenty of people that we know and plenty of us have been sick. It's like, yeah, it was a really sucky virus, But it's a virus like most, and yet, every virus has a potential, every flu has a potential of taking somebody out. That's what kills a lot of people. This one did the same, and it is nasty. I'm here to tell you. But, we have to move on. We can't live in fear. I mean, there's so many other things to be more afraid of, right? I mean, I don't know, alligators flying through the air and biting us. That's probably more likely at this point, But we've totally shut down our economy and taken away so many of our rights, and so much disruption over this whole thing. And I keep saying it. It's just like this. So much is so political. It's just so obvious at this point. It's like they're using this worldwide to try to keep people in control, and people don't like that. It's you go back to our Declaration of Independence, or our Constitution, or our Bill of Rights. I mean, our founding fathers knew, after looking at all the other examples throughout centuries of history, that if people are allowed to govern themselves, they'll do a pretty good job of it, as long as you've got some basic guidelines, and principles that everyone can agree to. We're pretty smart, but because we're pretty smart, some folks try to figure out how to bend those rules. And if we let them bend those rules, they'll keep bending and bending and bending until they break that rule. And if they broke it and nothing really happens, more people kind of move through that broken part of the rule, And we've been doing that for a long time. Everyone sees it. I mean, there's certain, there's little rules like the speed limit and stuff. People break those rules, right? But there's a lot of rules that are needless, and that's why people break them. They don't people don't really go out to break serious rules. You know you're not supposed to go out and murder, right, or steal. There's the basic things. We know these things, but it's funny, we're watching people murder and steal basically by using the rules. And yeah, I'm talking about the government and the people who have been, more directly, the people who have been put in position of responsibility, people who we elected or didn't elect, but who we pay as a population to look out for us. Instead of looking out for us, they're looking out for themselves, and they look at us as sort of the thing they're looking out against, if that makes sense. But you know what I mean. They're ruling us instead of working for us, and it's not supposed to be that way. But we all see it now. We know it, and it's escalated now under the Biden administration to the point where they're just doing things that we can see. This is not in our best interest. You had this huge COVID relief bill, and we're getting the short end of the stick, and everyone is getting money that doesn't deserve it. It's like we're bailing out New York, we're bailing out San Francisco. Pelosi, yeah, here you go. We're going to bail you out of all those really bad decisions. And, I don't think that's going to fix their homeless population, but they don't care. They just, want to balance the sheets on our backs. And same with New York, right? Look at Como. I mean, what a mess. It's like, and then of course they're talking about, he's been inappropriate to these women, which I'm sure he has. I mean, you look at the guy, he's a jerk. But that's not the big issue, and we all know it. And this is one of those smoke screens. It's like, they can, literally by, forcing these retirement communities, let's say, or these, old age homes, to take people back in there that have had the COVID. And now we found out that they've forced the people, the mentally challenged hospitals, to take people back in. They're putting the people who really need somebody to watch out for them in absolute harm's way. And they're using the rules to do it, like I was saying. And we see this. At the same time, the people who are doing the right thing are trying to do the right thing. They keep making new rules to make that wrong. It's like, well, I just want to open up my restaurant and feed people. Well, you can't do that because you're going to spread this germ. Well, I've done all the things you told me how to do. Well, you can't do it. And you can only do it, you have to shut down at this time. Well, why? What's the difference between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock? Well, there just is, because people become crazy, But we never elected these guys to make these kinds of decisions. And, like we've said before, when you look at politicians, people tend to look at them kind of in a low light. Let's say, we don't expect great things out of most of our politicians, yet we're allowing them to run our lives with these horrible decisions. It shouldn't be anyone's surprise that they're making horrible decisions. The surprise is that we're listening to them and not pushing back and saying, well, hold it, prove what you're talking about. Say, wear a mask. Why? Well, because, if you pee in your pants and this guy pees in his pants. No. I mean, really, show me some data, because this is a big freaking inconvenience, and it seems kind of nuts since we've never done it before. Oh, well, they do it in Asia. No, show it to me. And, I've read these things. There's nothing conclusive. I mean, there's so little that the mask does, and so much potentially bad, especially for people who have to wear them every day, all the time. And not only because, I can breathe through this just fine if I've had a really good one. I mean, just the physical labor of having to deal with a damn mask, constantly, messing with the damn thing when you're trying to work and all that. It's like most of these people who are bitching and complaining about this stuff don't have to wear the damn mask all day long. And I'm one of them, okay? I don't wear a mask unless I absolutely have to, and that's very rare, because I try to avoid situations throughout this whole thing. Maybe a bunch of you guys are the same way. But imagine, that's eliminated so much potential business. Just going down to Home Depot to get supplies. It's like, now I got to go through the mail. And, the FedEx guys, UPS guys hate us because, we're getting in tons of, dog food and cat food and cleaning supplies and car parts and all this stuff, the things that we would normally go get. And golly, speaking of that, have you noticed inventory on so many things? It's just like non-existent or super low. You can't get, T-shirts, hoodies, stuff like that. You can't get a lot of engine parts. You can't get little hardware pieces and all that. It shows you, we're so reliant on importing stuff that, simple things. Say why do we import straws? You know, really, you're gonna manufacture a straw, put it in a box, and ship it halfway around the world, and that makes sense. It's like we can make straws here, can't we? It's like, well, no, we've gotten rid of a lot of that equipment. But it's time to get back into that and replace that stuff. And the thing is, in order to do that, you have to invest a lot of money. If you're going to start a factory up to make straws or whatever widget, it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of courage. Running a business is real tough. I've done it for a long time, and it's very hard. And if the government can help you do that, that's a big deal. But for the longest time, the government has just gotten in your way. Instead of being your partner and saying, "Hey, yeah, we encourage you to. Let's see how we can help you." Maybe working with the schools and stuff, we can find people that can work there. There's a bunch of things. Maybe this is a good location. Sometimes it's tax help or infrastructure help, stuff like that. That would be great. That's what you would expect out of a government, because after all, you're going to employ people there. Probably you're going to use utilities in a big way. You're going to contribute a lot to the society. You would expect government to be very much in your corner, and that's just not been the case for a very long time. But under Trump, very pro-business, and there's still it takes a little time to change taxes and things of that nature, but businesses have to test the winds a lot. They're thinking about, well, what do I invest my money in this year? Do I build inventory? Do I hold on to my money because maybe things are going to get tough? Do I buy back my stock while I can because I'm worried about the stock market, what might happen there? And holy cow, there's been a lot of weird stuff in the stock market, but that's a whole different conversation. Maybe I'll jump in that quickly, but it's businesses have to make decisions looking into the future. When they see something like this administration that we have currently with Biden, you hold your money. You become a bear, and you're seeing the market starting to fluctuate. They're trying to puff it up, but the problem is when you're spending all this money that we don't have, and now we're putting ourselves in close to $30 trillion of debt, which is a trillion is unfathomable. Okay, it's a huge, 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 huge number, but 30 of that is just stupid. It's like grains of sand on a beach kind of numbers. And that's what we keep doing, and so we're saddling ourselves with all this debt. So businesses know that that's going to create a different climate. Businesses know that when you start printing money like that, it causes inflation. And think about it. Think, what would $2,000 buy? Well, as an example, in the late 60s, if you had $3,000, you could buy a really nice car, really nice, brand new car. All right? What kind of car can you buy for $3,000 today? But people don't make a whole lot more money in wages. Think about that. And we pay a lot of taxes. And remember, it's not just the taxes when you write a check to your state or federal government, but it's everything you buy. Everything you buy has, somebody had to pay taxes on the materials to produce it, had to pay taxes on the tooling to make the thing, on the warehouse where they do it, shipping. Every single action that you take, there's some weird little tax attached to it. So by the time you buy something, a lot of that is taxes, the prices that you're paying for something. It's like when you buy gasoline. I mean, by far most of the money you're paying is taxes. It's not actually for the gas itself. And so everything that we buy has taxes built into it. So imagine, that this is going to water down what the money's worth, and so you're thinking, what do I do with my money to make it more valuable? Do I invest it in my factory? Do I buy? Do I hire more workers? Well, probably not, right? You shrink it back down. That's not what we need right now. So, the kinds of things that this administration is doing is hurting us on the one big engine that we really rely on right now is small business. Big business has been doing great. The Amazons and Walmarts of this world have profited like none other throughout this whole pandemic, which is a reason to look into that. These guys are all really big Democrat donors, by the way, almost all of the major big money, and they use that money to steer that party the way they want it to, so that the party will do what they want it to do. Remember, we talked about that, where they're very upset with Trump because they couldn't steer Trump. And Trump did the right thing for all Americans, not just a few Americans, and that's the difference. The Biden administration is doing good things for just a few. I don't even know if they're Americans. They don't necessarily have to be. Just a few big donors. The rest of us are screwed. I mean, really, I don't care if you voted for them or not. You're not making out well at this point. All right? And I'd mentioned something about the stock market, but, there's a lot going on there. And, currencies around the world. It's going to be interesting. This is a year to look for all kinds of adjustments and changes. I'm sure of it. You're seeing, some unprecedented things happening right now. You can get into the whole the Q element there. I certainly enjoy looking into that. It's a fantastic world. So, some of it you have to discount, say, okay, that's way out there. But as I said before, these folks are really good at looking for developing news and stuff like that. They'll make all sorts of connections between these things that sometimes it leaves me scratching my head. But it's a very exciting concept. But in reality, what we're looking at is a lot of change for different reasons, just because of what's going on in the entire world. But then again, that's what the annons are telling us, right? So, as I said, I enjoy that stuff, but I make my forecasts on things that are more tangible. So, I know that the election was stolen because I've seen so much evidence of it. And then I've seen the way that the opposition has reacted. No, you can't look. No, you can't look. No, we won't look at the evidence in court. No, there's nothing to see there. No. It's like, okay, guys, I mean, if you were a 5-year-old, you'd get a spanking by now, because we see it. It's right there. And you're seeing these states actually admit to it, but no one wants to draw these pieces together because it's going to be like an atomic explosion, right? It's like, we have to, boom. We have to look at the ballots. We have to look at the machines. We have to decertify the election out of these states because it's uncertifiable, and nobody wants to do it. The courts don't want to touch that. Politicians don't want to touch that. This is going to mess up a lot of people on both sides, big time. So they don't want us to look at it. We have to look at it, and it's happening. So the whole world is watching us, just like we watch the whole world. And interestingly enough, even though the news isn't really talking about much other than just a few specific silly things, there really is a ton of stuff going on in the world, and some of it's downright scary. The Middle East is really scary right now. China's always scary. World financial, scary. So it's just a good time to be tuned in, and I'll try to tell you what I can as I see it. But, thanks for listening. And have a great day. As scary as I'm saying it, there's reason to look forward to things getting much better. Because as people finally turn over the rock and see the dirt, you can finally deal with it. And we have to deal with it. And I think a lot of us want to at this point. We don't like what we're looking at, do we? So, be cheerful and be hopeful. And see you around. Thanks. Bye.